Trash talking.
Hello, everyone. I'm Doug Johnson. I'm White Trash Talking. Okay, so today I want to talk about mind control and how people are manipulated into doing things that are not to their benefit, but instead benefit the manipulator. Mind control is an aspect of ideology, which is essentially meaning in the service of power. Manipulation through ideology is different than normal persuasion in that people are deceived into adopting the manipulator's ideas as their own without being aware of the possible self-harm they are committing. What I know about ideology began from reading this book by George Lakoff and Mark Johnson called Metaphors We Live By. I'm going to play a very short clip of George Lakoff's explanation of how we conceptualize our world and how our common sense assumptions of reality, which seem fixed and absolute, are perceived through what he calls frames, the bases of which are largely metaphorical. Once you understand how we perceive reality, you can better understand how frames are created and managed to control our thoughts. Here's George Lakoff's explanation.
Here is the assumptions about reason that I learned growing up, and you may have learned them too. The first assumption is that you know what you think, that reason is conscious. The fact is it's 98% unconscious. 98% unconscious. Second, reason is supposed to be dispassionate. It's the opposite. You can't be rational without being emotional. Second, it's assumed that you can reason directly about the world, that reason can fit the world as it is directly. False. Why? Very simple thing. You think with your brain. You have no choice. That's all you can do is think with your brain. Your brain evolved to run a body. Well, everything you understand about anything at all comes through your body and is understood in your brain. Every idea is there in neural circuitry. Without the neural circuitry, you don't think. And we now know a lot about how neural circuitry gives rise to thought. But what does it mean? It turns out that the brain is not arbitrarily structured. It's not a general purpose computer or anything like that. It has very particular structure. And that means that you think in terms of structures called frames, for example. Think of a hospital. There are doctors and nurses and patients and receptionists and places like operating rooms and reception desks and recovery rooms and instruments like scalpels and defibrillators and so on. Those are the elements of the hospital frame. Then there are things that happen in hospitals. That is the normal stuff. Surgeons operate on patients in operating rooms with scalpels. You know what happens in hospitals because you know the frame of that. So this is important. Every word is defined with respect to such a structure, and that structure is neurally there in your brain. It is a physical thing. Okay? We think in terms of those things, and they are not neutral. They don't just fit the world as it is. Frames come in systems, and those systems are structured in terms of worldviews and moral views.
I just want to add that one word of a frame can activate the entire frame. And when you hear scalpel, as he mentioned, you situate that word within your entire frame, and the other aspects such as doctor, hospital, etc., automatically come to your mind. And as he says, frames are not neutral. They're not morally or emotionally neutral. Fear, for example, which is a common device used by those in power, can be activated within us with the mention of just a few words. Let's listen to the rest of what Lakoff says.
Also think in terms of metaphors. Metaphors are modes of thought. They're not just in language. They have to do with the way we think. And a system of metaphors is learned what are called primary metaphors are learned before you learn language, just by functioning in the world. So, and you learn hundreds. For example, you learn more is up and less is down. Not just here, not just in the US, not just in Europe, but around the world. Right? Why? You learn that affection is warm. Somebody's a warm person or a cold person. Why? How does that happen? Well, here's how it works. Let's take more is up. I pour more water into a glass, the level goes up. Okay? Every time. Never misses. I pour more stuff on the desk, the level goes up. If you're a baby and you look around and this happens around you, more formula gets put in the bottle, the level goes up, etc. And you see this, you may not be paying attention, but your brain is. Your brain is activated in two ways. There's two parts of your brain activated, one for quantity and one for verticality. So every time the quantity goes up, the verticality goes up. The two parts of your brain are activated together. Now, what happens when two parts of the brain are activated together over and over and over every day? Right? You have activation. Every neuron is connected to 10,000 others. So groups of neurons that compute quantity and those that compute verticality are activated over and over together. And there are particular pathways that you're born with. So along these pathways, the activation spreads. And each time a neuron is activated, it gets stronger. The connections to the next neuron get strengthened. That is, you get more receptor molecules across the synapses. Because we can talk about why later, if you care about it. All right, now, it turns out what happens is that the activation spreads along existing pathways until they find the shortest common path. And then you got activation from both directions and you form a circuit. And it keeps on getting stronger every day. That circuit is the metaphor that more is up, less is down. And then you have language. When you learn language, you learn prices rise and prices fall and they skyrocket and all sorts of things like that. But it's a generalization that you've learned that's physically there in your brain. And you have learned hundreds of these.
Okay, so as he said, we understand abstractions through our own body's experiences with the physical world around us. And in his book, he details various types of conceptual metaphors, such as the orientational or spatial metaphor, which he gave an example of, more is up. There's hundreds of them. And then there's ontological metaphor, which is experience and extractions are understood as physical substances. An example of that would be, say, during the Iraq War, when George Bush was talking about the need to attack Iraq, and he wouldn't talk about Iraq, he would talk about one person, Saddam Hussein. Because Iraq is an abstraction, it's complex, we can't really understand it unless you're there, but you can understand one person, especially if that person is the boogeyman and you've vilified him. The third is the structural metaphor. One example is the event structure metaphor, and more specifically, the journey metaphor. And this is very, very common. It's universal. Now I will give you examples of how two former US presidents, in their State of the Union addresses, used two types of conceptual metaphors to subtly yet powerfully manipulate the thinking of the American population. I think of this as kind of a slow drip ideology that's fed into the population on a regular daily basis, but it's not something you notice. You don't even notice they're talking about it, yet it's powerful. One primary goal of power is to maintain the status quo. That's because the status quo benefits them, not necessarily us. This requires keeping citizens compliant and obedient. The examples I will show are very subtle but powerful repetitions of carefully crafted text by highly trained political speechwriters. Okay, both presidents that I'm going to show you make use of the event structure metaphor, the journey metaphor. It's basically our destiny is a shared journey. This is a metaphor. Our destiny as a nation is a shared journey together. And they situate the American electorate on a pathway together, traveling forward. Very, very basic, okay? We learn as babies that forward movement leads to the attainment of goals. Just a simple movement forward. Even when we couldn't even walk yet, we crawled forward to pick up something. The idea of forward movement becomes neurally connected to the idea of progress, which is evaluated positively, as opposed to moving backwards, which is evaluated negatively. Very subtle, but powerful. Okay, so there are certain entailments that this idea of movement together on a pathway evoke. So the way that the metaphor works is we're citizens traveling together, as I said. Our nation is a vehicle. Our collective goals are the collective destination, shared destination, and the problems along the pathway are obstacles to achieving our goals. That's the wider metaphor of the journey together. This implies unity, it implies a shared destiny, same goals, and it implies inevitability, like there's no other choice. Because if you think about it, if you're on a pathway and you're traveling with other people and everything's going well, you don't get off and go backwards, that's negative, and you wouldn't be with the other people, you'd be vulnerable. So all of this is very subtly implied with just the use of the words moving forward on a pathway, moving forward, forward movement. And it's drummed into us again and again and again. And it evokes this entire framework of ideas, which goes back to our infancy. Okay, so let me show you some of the excerpts. So here they are. So this is George Bush in 2004. He says, and this is forward motion, forward movement, journey. America is pursuing a forward strategy of freedom in the greater Middle East. Forward motion. We face a choice. We can go forward with confidence and resolve, or we can turn back to the dangerous illusions that terrorists are not plotting and outlaw regimes are no threat to us. So going forward is positive. We'll achieve our aims. Turning back, negative evaluation, and in this case, it's dangerous, and it evokes fear. Okay, and then he says, today, having come far on our own historical journey, we must decide, will we turn back or finish well? He said this in 2006, when the blowback in Iraq was in full force, US soldiers were being killed, and he's trying to convince the electorate that staying there is the right idea. So we've come far in this journey together. Can't turn back, that's dangerous. That's negative. Along this journey, we have a shared destiny. Destiny is conveyed as history, a phone call. It's silly, but a person, all right? And that's an ontological metaphor. Our history as a person. And he said, history has called on America and our allies to action. And it is both our responsibility and privilege to fight freedom's fight. Freedom here is characterized as a person. We're going to fight freedom's fight. It's very powerful when you're not paying attention and it works on you at a very, very deep level. Continues, we go forward with confidence because this call of history has come to the right country. Go forward, go forward. They're maintaining the status quo here. In this case, it was war. Maintain the status quo. Don't stop, we have to finish. We accept the call of history to deliver the oppressed and move forward, move this world towards peace. Yes, our goal is to deliver the oppressed. It's biblical. Deliverance. The call of history has said so. All right, let's see how Obama compares to this. You'll see it's not much different. After the banking scandal where Obama bailed out the banks to the tune of trillions of dollars, he then made this speech, his first major speech afterwards. He says, it's tempting to look back at these moments and assume that our progress was inevitable, that America was always destined to succeed. Looking back is negative, progress is positive, it's forward motion, and we have a shared destiny together along the path. He says, we chose to move forward as one nation, as one people. Again, we are tested. There's an obstacle in the path. Again, we must answer history's call. It's our shared destiny. History is a person calling us. If we choose to move forward as one nation, as one people, our destiny is certain to prevail, moving forward along a path. We will move forward together or not at all, for the challenges we face are bigger than party and bigger than politics. Move forward, maintain the status quo, keep going. As long as we are joined in common purpose, as long as we maintain our common resolve, our journey moves forward. It is time to leave behind the decisive battles of the past. It is time to move forward as one nation. We've come too far to turn back now. This is what George Bush said, almost exactly. All right? He wants to maintain this momentum. Okay, this is very subtle. It's a subtle drip to maintain the status quo. It's constantly fed to the American electorate. All right. Now I want to look at a more radical, more in-your-face kind of mind control. And I want to introduce the ideas of Jason Christoff. I recently discovered him on the Kim Iverson show. So let me just play what he says. You'll see immediately how things are similar and different with what you've already looked at.
We're hardwired as human beings to be mind controlled. How mind control works, repetition is key in mind control because we have a part of the brain that is obsessed with repetition because the repetition equates to what the bigger herd are saying, thinking, or doing. And there's a part of our brain that counts repetition outside our conscious awareness in an attempt to find what that herd, the bigger herd, is saying, thinking, or doing to satisfy basic safety requirements.
Okay, this is where he differs. It's repetition. Lakoff said that as well, that it's through the repetition that these circuits are formed. It's repetition in the basis for the formation of frames. But he's saying, Jason Christoff is saying that it's this repetition that signals the herd mentality, and we want to be with the herd. All right, let's continue.
So all a person really has to do, this is sort of like ancient magic, is repeat the mantra or the slogan or what they want the people to believe, and this unconscious, subconscious part of the brain starts counting for that repetitive content. That's one aspect of it, but then it will force us to basically adopt that repetitive content as our own in an attempt to bond with the bigger herd so that we can find safety and security. And the people and the using.
So we adopt it as our own without knowing it. We think this is an original thought.
You know, the screen is very important. I mean, the people who are organizing, whether it's governmental mind control or media mind control, they know what's on the screen on a repetitive basis at noon will be on the street at night. That fear is one of the modalities that can upregulate the compliance quotient.
And he's saying that the images, and this is the direction that ideology is going, because text, and especially these presidential speeches, that's a thing of the past, I believe. And the slow drip kind, I think it's becoming more radical with images on the screen, more immediate, more powerful perhaps. Let's continue.
Because fear is a form of damage, and damaged animals are injured animals, and injured animals need the group more than strong animals. So when you can make an animal afraid, strong animals aren't afraid of anything. So what you need to do to make them comply with the group, to make them feel like they'll need the group to survive, you make them afraid or you injure them. Fear and injury sort of have similar impacts on a mind control victim.
Yeah, fear is always used to drum up support for war. You portray the enemy, so-called enemy, as a boogeyman, that they're coming to get us. George Bush was very good at that. So, but then he's saying injury. Now that I didn't think of that before. I think he's right. I think if you're injured, you're more susceptible. All right. So now what I want to do is play a 1-minute clip from this 1-hour documentary called The Push by Darren Brown. It was on Netflix in 2021, I think, and then it was removed. I only saw it recently, but it's extremely powerful. You just got to watch it. It's free on YouTube. You got to Google it. You'll find it. It's right there. But yeah, The Push by Darren Brown. And in this documentary, what they do is they take 4 people and they take each one at a time, and they spend 2 to 3 hours with that person, and they convince them to commit murder. These are normal people. They're not violent, they're carefully chosen, just average people. 2 are men, 2 are women. There was one man who just said no. He walked away. I'm not going to do it when it came to the act of murder. But the other 3, the 2 women and the man, they actually committed murder by pushing a man off of a roof. And before I show this, I wanted to say that everyone involved were actors. This was a setup, but the participants, the pusher, was not an actor. The person being pushed off the roof is a stuntman dressed up as an old man, and he's not killed, obviously. All right, so let me just show you 1 minute of this. It's gripping. I mean, you just got to watch this.
Push.
So he's thinking about it. He has doubts. Look at that. Okay, so he did it. He felt terrible afterwards, but he did it. He murdered somebody. Let's watch this woman. She also feels terrible, probably can't believe she did it, but she did it. Kind of like soldiers coming back from Iraq or from wherever. Let's watch the 3rd one. Okay, I mean, you got to watch the whole documentary to see how they take them incrementally to this. It's enjoyable to watch. I just had my mouth open the whole time. Yeah, The Push. Okay? So that's just a brief overview of ideology, mind control, a couple of different forms of it. It's going on all the time by people in power manipulating us. All right, I'm going to leave it there. Please like and subscribe. I'll see you next time. Bye.